any one of you, about what is happening in Gaza. 30,000 people dead, 1.8 million displaced, 500,000 people on the brink of starvation. Starvation is being used as a war arm. And when we condemn this happening in Ukraine, we have to use the same words for what's happening in Gaza. In Gaza, the United Nations agencies, OCHA, World Food Programme, UNRWA, are the last lifeline for many people. Yes, UNRWA is facing allegations, but allegations has to be proved. That's why they are allegations.
Chris Doyle to talk more about the politics of all this. He's the director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. We've heard a lot of talk about the hunger spreading. This statement from the EU's top diplomat at the UN Security Council is very significant. What do you think it shows about the evolution of the EU's position on Gaza?
Slowly but surely, the European Union and indeed other states and bodies are shifting to a more critical stance towards Israel. But it is well over 4 months too late. Israel imposed a total siege on Gaza within days of the Hamas atrocities on the 7th of October. It's a stated official policy of the State of Israel to deprive Palestinians in Gaza, whether civilian or Hamas fighter, of food, water, medicine, and other essential items. So it's only now that we hear the EU foreign policy chief talking about starvation used as a weapon of war. There wasn't that sort of hesitancy when Russia was doing this in Ukraine or the Syrian regime was doing it to Syrians in Syria. But of course, one has to welcome the fact that they are beginning to take more serious steps, that there are countries in Europe who are prepared to consider certain actions, including sanctioning settlers, some that are considering suspending the sale and trade of weapons and military equipment with the State of Israel. But frankly, for all of those thousands and thousands of Palestinians who've been killed, injured, all those children who are being starved and dehydrated to death, and those numbers are only going to go up, this is far too little and far too late.
Yes, so you're saying bodies like the EU as well as nations are more and more calling this policy out. I wonder how significant you think the change in tone, the change in language is, and how much impact it can really have without policies or action behind it. And if so, what action should be taken?
You're absolutely right. There needs to be serious action because Israel has demonstrated it is completely immune to press releases and statements over the years. It's ignored all the condemnations, such as they were on settlement growth, on home demolitions, on forcible transfer. So it's not until the European Union decides to suspend, for example, this free trade agreement, association agreement with Israel, until it stops weapons trades, until it actually takes significant action, that anything is likely to change. And I remind you that the European Union is actually Israel's largest trading partner. It is not some bit part player in all of this. Everyone keeps on mentioning the United States as Israel's main ally. That is true. But Israel has very serious and deep relations with the European Union. The problem is that there are states such as Hungary, for example, Poland, one or two others, who simply will not sign up to the sorts of positions the countries like Spain and Ireland would. So there are divisions in the European Union. It is a bloc of 27 states, after all. And it's become so difficult where foreign policy has to be done by unanimity. You can't just do it by majority voting to actually get a really strong principled stance on many foreign policy issues, but including this one. And therein lies the challenge. How do you persuade Viktor Orban After all, Viktor Orban has just come back from seeing President Trump, the former president, now Republican nominee. And obviously they see things eye to eye. He has a very different worldview from many other European leaders, particularly in the western part of the continent.
Yeah, a big challenge. And you mentioned the United States there. I think over the weekend we saw perhaps the biggest shift in tone coming from right at the top of the White House. Again, how likely do you think it is that the US will change its policy or do anything more than just change its language in terms of Gaza?
There are stories, reports that the United States is considering, slowing down its military support to Israel. I mean, the United States has really significant levers that it can pull should it choose to do so. I mean, and it would be much easier for a president. It's in his power. He doesn't have to have 26 other leaders agreeing with him. There's the military aid, the economic aid, the way in which the United States acts as a diplomatic shield to Israel at the United Nations Security Council and in other international bodies. So for sure, President Biden could do a lot more. The trouble is, it's an election year and everything is calculated in electoral politics. And on certain occasions, when he's thinking about states like Michigan that he has to win, where there are a lot of Arab Americans there, obviously upset at what's happening in Gaza to the Palestinians, Biden has made some constructive noises, but he is still looking really through this, at all of this, through an election lens, rather than how do we really get this to stop? Because the only way to do that is to put real and significant pressure on Israel to bring about that immediate ceasefire, but particularly here, bringing in the aid. And remember, the weakness of the United States was so exposed by the fact that Biden refused to really put the pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu about the aid, and instead went for this crazy plan to do airdrops into Gaza. I say crazy because it's the least effective form of delivering aid. It actually killed people. Some of the aid, veered off into the Mediterranean. You don't actually have any guarantee it gets to those who need it most. In fact, to the contrary, it's more likely that the fittest and the strongest are going to get to the aid first when it lands in Gaza. It was crazy, but it highlighted that self-imposed American weakness, that they couldn't actually compel Israel to get the borders open, to get the trucks in, which would have been the proper, efficient, sane way to get aid to those people who are being starved, let's not forget.
Chris Doyle, thank you for joining us and bringing us neatly back to our beginning point of the programme about starvation. Okay.